Evicted from home by her husband. She returned to her parents' house and couldn't believe what she saw. Rebecca Mitchell held her two children tightly as tears streamed down her face. After a terrible fight about money, her husband had mercilessly thrown her out of the house, shouting cruel words that still echoed in her mind. It was then that she made the most difficult decision of her life. With 2-year-old Nathan in her arms and 6-year-old Emma by her side, she would board the first bus to Bakersfield in the interior of California, where her parents lived on the family's small rural property. She hadn't spoken to them in 5 years after an argument about her choice to marry so young. "Mommy, where are we going?" asked Emma, tugging at the hem of her mother's simple dress. "We're going to visit your grandparents, my dear," replied Rebecca, trying to hide the desperation in her voice. The bus ride lasted 6 hours. Rebecca had only $200 in her pocket, all she managed to grab in a hurry before being put out. Nathan cried from hunger, and Emma asked 1,000 questions she didn't know how to answer. Throughout the journey, she clung to the hope that her parents would welcome her with open arms, even after so much time without contact. They arrived in the small town in the late afternoon. The bus driver dropped her off at the stop closest to the rural property, still 3 miles away. With one child in her arms and the other by the hand, she began walking down the dirt road she knew by heart since childhood. With each step, memories of her happy childhood in that place came flooding back. "Are you tired, Mommy?" asked Emma, who was already limping a little from the weight of her small backpack. "We're almost there, sweetheart. Look, right up ahead is Grandma Dorothy and Grandpa Harold's house." But when they rounded the last bend in the road and saw the property, Rebecca stopped suddenly. Her heart raced and she felt her legs go weak. Before her, where the welcoming house of her childhood should have been, there were only ruins. The wooden structure was completely deteriorated, the roof had collapsed in several places, and vegetation had taken over almost everything. "Mommy, what's that ugly house?" commented Emma, pointing to the wreckage. Rebecca couldn't answer. She put Nathan down and slowly approached that devastating sight. The fence her father always kept neatly painted was broken in several places. The artesian well that supplied water to the entire property was covered with an old, torn tarp. The chicken coop that once housed more than 50 chickens was empty, with all the wire mesh torn. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. She walked to the front door of the house. The wood was swollen with moisture and warped. With some effort, she managed to push it open. The creak of the rusty hinges echoed through the empty interior. Inside, the neglect was even more shocking. Furniture covered with moldy tarps, the smell of dampness, cobwebs in every corner. "Where are the grandparents?" insisted Emma, now with evident fear in her voice. "I don't know, my dear. I don't know," whispered Rebecca, feeling as if the ground was giving way beneath her feet. She decided to look for the nearest neighbors. The Williams family had always been very close to her parents. They walked another 500 yards to the neighboring property. Mrs. Margaret, a white-haired lady who must have been about 60, was in the yard hanging clothes on the line. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Margaret. Do you remember me? I'm Rebecca, Harold and Dorothy Mitchell's daughter." The woman turned and got a visible fright. For a moment she seemed to have seen a ghost. She looked at the children and then back at Rebecca, clearly uncomfortable. "Rebecca! Good heavens! You're back," she said with a hesitant voice. "Mrs. Margaret, where are my parents? What happened to the house?" The neighbor looked around as if afraid someone might hear her. She dried her hands on her apron and came closer, lowering her voice. "Dear, your parents left over 3 years ago. They left everything behind without a word to anyone. One morning they just weren't there anymore." "How do you mean they left? For where?" "Nobody knows, child. There were rumors about debts, problems with loan sharks from the city. People said they owed a lot of money and had to flee in the middle of the night." Rebecca felt the world spin. She leaned on the neighbor's gate so she wouldn't fall. Nathan began to cry in her arms, as if sensing his mother's tension. "And the property?" "It was foreclosed. It's been for sale for 2 years. but nobody wants to buy a house in that condition. They say whoever takes it over will have to pay the outstanding debts. Mrs. Margaret invited Rebecca to come in for a coffee, but she was too much in shock to accept. She thanked her for the information and went back to the abandoned property with the children. She had nowhere to go and no money to go back. Night was falling, and she needed to find a safe place to sleep with the little ones. She explored the ruined house, looking for any room that offered minimal shelter. The room that had once been hers was relatively preserved. The roof there was intact, and the walls, though mouldy, were still solid. With some planks she found in the backyard and an old tarp, she improvised a barrier against the wind and damp. "Mummy, are we sleeping right here?" asked Emma, clearly frightened by the whole situation. "Just for tonight, my princess. Tomorrow Mummy will sort everything out." But Rebecca knew she hadn't the slightest idea how to sort anything out. No money, no home, no job, and now discovering she didn't even have her parents to turn to. She laid the children down on some old blankets she found in a trunk and stayed awake all night planning what to do. The next day, she decided to go into town to talk to someone at the city hall about the property situation. She left the children playing in the backyard and walked the 3 kilometers to the center of Bakersfield. At the Public Works office, a grumpy clerk informed her that the property was indeed foreclosed due to unpaid property tax and loan debts. To reclaim the property, you would need to settle a debt of $85,000, said the man without looking up from his papers. 85,000. But how did my parents manage to owe so much money? I don't know the details, miss. I only know that if nobody pays by the end of the year, the property will go to public auction. Rebecca returned home devastated. $85,000 was an impossible sum for her. During the walk, she passed the municipal school where she had studied as a child. The principal, Mrs. Barbara, recognized her and called her over to talk. "Rebecca Mitchell. Child, I haven't seen you around here for years. How are your parents?" Rebecca told her the whole situation. Mrs. Barbara was surprised and worried, especially upon learning she was living in the ruined house with 2 small children. "Child, this can't be. Children can't live in conditions like that. You need to seek help from the county social services." "No, Mrs. Barbara. If I go to social services, they might try to take my girls from me." "Rebecca, you need to think of the children's well-being. At least go and talk, explain your situation. Maybe they can help in some way." She knew the principal was right, but the fear of losing her daughters was greater than anything. She returned to the property determined to manage on her own. She spent the day cleaning what she could of the house, trying to create a minimally livable environment. Nathan helped in his own way, carrying little twigs, while Emma swept the floor with an improvised little broom. As evening fell, they heard the sound of a car approaching. It was a white pickup truck that stopped in front of the destroyed gate. A man around 50 years old, well-dressed and carrying a document case, got out. "Good afternoon. I'm looking for the person responsible for this property," he said, looking with disdain at the state of the house. "That's me. How can I help you?" "My name is Gerald Thompson. I'm a real estate broker, and I have a client interested in buying this land. I came to check the conditions." Rebecca explained that she was the daughter of the original owners and that she was trying to understand the property's situation. Gerald showed some papers and said his client was willing to pay the outstanding debts in cash and even give an extra amount to the family. "How much would that extra amount be?" asked Rebecca, perhaps seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. $10,000. It's a generous offer considering the deplorable state everything is in. Rebecca asked for time to think. $10,000 wasn't a lot, but it would be enough for her to start over somewhere else with the children. Gerald said he would return in 3 days for a definitive answer. That night she had a serious conversation with herself. Selling the property would mean giving up the only thing left from her family, but it could also be the chance to give her daughters a better life. She was torn between her heart and her reason. The next day, she decided to look for more information about her parents' debts. She went to the town's records office and asked to see the property records. The clerk, a friendly woman around 40 years old, helped her better understand the situation. "Look here, according to the records, your parents took out several loans using the property as collateral. The last one was 4 years ago, for $60,000. $60,000? But why would they need so much money?" I can't say why, dear. I only know that when they couldn't pay, the property became collateral for the creditors. Rebecca spent the whole afternoon at the records office, analyzing document by document. Something didn't make sense. The loans had very close dates and all were with the same financial institution, something called St. Joseph Rural Credit Cooperative. She had never heard of this cooperative. "Miss, that cooperative closed 2 years ago due to irregularities," commented the clerk. "It was even in the local paper. The owner was accused of running scams on rural properties in the region." "Scams? What do you mean?" "I don't know the details, but the investigation showed he offered easy loans to small rural landowners and then used legal tricks to take the properties when people couldn't pay. This information changed everything. If the cooperative was fraudulent, perhaps her parents' loans were also irregular." Rebecca requested copies of all the documents and returned home with new hope. That night, after putting the children to bed, she examined each paper by candlelight. There was something strange about her parents' signatures on the contracts. She knew their handwriting well, and those signatures looked different, especially her father's. She decided to seek legal help. The next morning, she went to the only law office in town. The lawyer, Attia David Carson, was a young man, recently graduated, who had just opened the office. "Ms. Mitchell, from what I see here, there really are signs of irregularities in these contracts. These signatures need to undergo a handwriting examination." "And how much would that examination cost?" "About $2,000. But if forgery is actually proven, we can annul all the contracts and you recover the property debt-free." $2,000 she didn't have. Atavas David, moved by the situation, offered to work for a lower fee and pay for the examination himself, to be reimbursed only if they won the case. Meanwhile, Gerald Thompson returned as promised, wanting an answer about selling the property. Rebecca asked for a few more days, claiming she needed to locate other documents. He became visibly irritated and said his offer would only stand for 1 more week. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. During those days of waiting, Rebecca decided to explore the abandoned property more thoroughly. Perhaps she would find clues about what really happened to her parents. In the basement of the house, she discovered a metal box hidden behind some loose bricks. Inside it were several letters and a small notebook with her father's notes. The letters were exchanged between her parents and revealed much of what happened in the last months before their disappearance. Her father had discovered that Gerald Thompson and the owner of the cooperative were partners in a scheme to appropriate rural lands. They offered loans that were impossible to repay and then falsified documents to seize the properties. "Dorothy, I'm very afraid. I discovered that Gerald and Daniel from the cooperative set a trap for us. The documents we signed weren't what they said they were. Now they want our land and are threatening our family," read one of the letters. In another letter, she found more shocking information. "Dorothy, I got proof of what they're doing. I have copies of the original documents that show the forgeries, but they found out and are now after us. We'll have to flee tonight. I hid the proof at the school where Rebecca studied in the principal's office cabinet. If anything happens to us, she may one day return and discover the truth." Rebecca was in shock. Her parents didn't abandon the property out of irresponsibility. They were victims of a criminal scheme and had to flee to protect their own lives. And more importantly, they left proof hidden at the school. In the middle of the night, she went to the municipal school. She knew Mrs. Barbara always left a bathroom window poorly latched. That's how she and her classmates used to skip class as children. She entered the school in the dark and went to the principal's office. The cabinet was locked, but she managed to pick the lock with a hairpin. Inside, she found a sealed envelope with her name on it. Inside it were copies of all the original loan documents, clearly showing the differences in the signatures. There was also a cassette tape recording where her father explained the entire scheme and named other families who had been harmed in the same way. "My daughter, if you're hearing this, it means you've returned home and discovered our situation. Forgive us for not telling you the truth before. This man, Gerald, together with Daniel Patrick from the cooperative, created a scheme to steal land from rural families. They deceived us, forged our signature, and now want our property. We have proof of everything, but they are dangerous. We had to flee to protect our family, especially you. If you get this proof, seek out Atty. Robert Anderson. He's the only lawyer in the region who isn't involved with them." Rebecca listened to the recording 3 times, crying. Her parents didn't abandon her. They made the greatest sacrifice they could. They gave up everything to protect the family. Now it was her turn to fight for justice. The next morning, she sought out Atty. Robert Anderson in the neighboring town of Delano. He was a lawyer in his 50s, respected in the region. When Rebecca showed him the proof, he became very interested in the case. "Rebecca, this evidence is explosive. This scheme has harmed at least 15 families in the last 5 years. With this evidence, we can not only recover your property, but also criminally prosecute everyone involved. And how much would it cost to hire your services, attorney? For a case like this, which could set a precedent to help other families, I work pro bono. The cause is just and the evidence is solid." Atty. Robert Anderson explained that the lawsuit would be long and that during this time she would need to find a safe place to live with the children. He suggested she seek help from social services, but with the necessary documentation to prove she was legally fighting for the property. Rebecca returned to Bakersfield and sought out the municipal social worker, Ms. Jennifer Parker. She was a woman of about 35, quite serious, who initially showed distrust regarding the children's situation. "Rebecca, I understand your situation, but I cannot allow 2 children to continue living in precarious conditions while awaiting a lawsuit that could take months or years. Ms. Jennifer, I have the proof that I am the rightful owner. I just need time for the justice system to recognize my rights." "I understand, but my responsibility is for the children's immediate well-being. I'll give you 2 weeks to find adequate housing. Otherwise, I will be forced to take measures to protect the minors." 2 weeks. Rebecca left the meeting desperate. She had no money to rent a house and knew no one in the city who could help her. It was then that she remembered the town's Catholic church. Perhaps the priest could advise her or know someone willing to help. Father Thomas was a kind man of about 60 who listened to everyone's problems with great patience. When Rebecca told her story, he was deeply moved. "My child, I know a person who might be able to help you. Kenneth Hughes is a widower, lives alone in a big house, and has always said he would like some company. He is a hard-working man of good character. Perhaps he would accept you living there in exchange for some domestic services." Kenneth Hughes was a 48-year-old man who worked as a mechanic in town. He had lost his wife 2 years prior in an accident and lived alone in a 3-bedroom house. When Father Thomas explained Rebecca's situation, he promptly offered to help. "Of course you can stay here. The house is too empty anyway. I just need you to take care of the cleaning and maybe prepare some meals. In return, you have guaranteed housing and food." It seemed the perfect solution. Rebecca and the children moved into Kenneth's house. For the first time in weeks, Nathan and Emma had a safe roof over their heads and hot food every day. Kenneth was kind to the children and respectful toward Rebecca, but after a few weeks the situation began to get complicated. Kenneth started to show romantic interest in Rebecca, something she could not reciprocate. She was focused on recovering her property and had not yet overcome the trauma of her failed marriage. "Rebecca, you are a special woman. The children, like me and I, am very fond of all of you. Why don't we think about something more serious between us?" he said one night after dinner. "Kenneth, you are a good man, but I am not ready for a relationship. I need to sort out my life first." "But your life could be sorted out here. You don't need to fight for that land anymore. We could start a family. I can support you." Rebecca realized he was developing expectations she could not meet. The situation grew tense when Kenneth started drinking more than usual. One night, he came home drunk and made inappropriate advances, frightening the children. "Rebecca, you've been living in my house for 2 months. It's not fair that I get nothing in return besides a clean house and food," he said, clearly affected by the alcohol. She realized she needed to get out of there before the situation became untenable. The next day she spoke with Atty. Robert Anderson about the progress of the case. He had important news. "Rebecca, We managed to locate 6 other families who were victims of the same scheme. They are all willing to testify. Furthermore, we discovered that Gerald Thompson is using forged documents to take possession of more rural properties in the region. Does that mean we can speed up the process? Yes, and more importantly, we obtained an injunction that prevents any sale or transfer of your property until the case is judged. Gerald can no longer pressure you. That was the best news Rebecca could receive. With the injunction in hand, she had legal security to return to the family property. She explained the situation to Kenneth, who was initially upset but ended up understanding. "Rebecca, if you change your mind, you know you'll always have a place here," he said on the day of her departure, now sober and more controlled. Back at the property, Rebecca began cleaning and organizing the rooms that were in better condition. With some materials that Atira Robert helped her obtain, she managed to make 2 bedrooms habitable. The kitchen still needed a lot of work, but it was enough to cook the basics. During this period, she began to learn more about the stories of other families who were also harmed by Gerald's scheme. One of them was the Johnson family, who lost a 20-hectare property in the same way. Mr. George Johnson, a 62-year-old man, became an important ally in the legal fight. "Rebecca, this Gerald Thompson destroyed several families in the region. My wife became ill from grief when we lost our land. If your evidence can help bring justice, count on me for whatever you need," said Mr. George. Together, they organized meetings with other victims of the scheme. They discovered the pattern was always the same. Rural families with financial difficulties were approached with offers of easy loans. After they signed the contracts, they discovered the conditions were much worse than promised. When they couldn't pay, they lost their properties. Atira Robert suggested they seek out the local press to publicize the case. Her journalist from the Bakersfield Regional Journal, Christopher Davis, became interested in the story and did a cover piece about the scheme. The report caused a major stir in the city. Several people who knew other victims made contact, and the case grew to proportions no one had imagined. Gerald Thompson tried to sue the newspaper for defamation, but Atira Robert had already sent all the evidence to the district attorney's office. A week after the article was published, something unexpected happened. Rebecca received a visit that left her in shock. Her own parents were at the property's door. Harold Mitchell, now with completely white hair, and Dorothy Mitchell, visibly thinner and aged, had seen the report in the newspaper and decided to return. The reunion was emotional but also tense. "Daughter, forgive us for leaving without saying anything," said Mrs. Dorothy, crying heavily. "We had no choice, Rebecca. They threatened our family. They said if we didn't leave town something bad could happen to you," added her father Harold. "But why didn't you look for me all these years? I suffered so much thinking you abandoned me because of that fight. We were afraid they would discover where you were and harm you too. Only when we saw the report did we understand that you had returned and are fighting for justice." The reunion with her parents brought valuable information for the case. They had kept more documents that proved the irregularities, and even had names of cooperative employees who participated in the scheme. Most importantly, they knew where to find Daniel Patrick himself, the former owner of the cooperative, who was hiding in a city in Arizona. Atira Robert Anderson was thrilled with this new evidence. With the testimony of Rebecca's parents and the location of the main criminal, the case grew much stronger. He filed a request for preventive detention for Gerald Thompson and Daniel Patrick. But Gerald didn't stay idle. Discovering that Rebecca's parents had returned, he tried one last desperate move. He offered $50,000 for her to give up everything and sign the definitive transfer of the property. "Rebecca, think about it. $50,000 is a lot of money. You could start a new life somewhere else and forget all these problems," he said in a tense meeting at a restaurant in town. "It's not about money, Gerald. It's about justice. You harmed many families and you need to pay for it. You have no idea who you're messing with, girl. I have influential friends in the region. I can make your life very difficult." Rebecca recorded this conversation on her cell phone, following Atira Roberts' advice. Gerald's threats became another piece of evidence against him in the lawsuit. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. The civil trial was finally scheduled for 3 months later. During this period, Rebecca and her family worked hard to recover the property. With the help of neighbors and the other affected families, they managed to renovate parts of the house and make it habitable again. Mr. George Johnson, who was a retired bricklayer, helped fix the roof. Mrs. Margaret brought furniture she no longer used. Father Thomas organized a campaign at the church to collect construction materials. Little by little, the property came back to life. Nathan and Emma adapted well to life in the countryside. The girl enrolled in the municipal school and quickly made new friends. The boy played freely in the large backyard, something he had never experienced in the city. They especially loved their grandparents, who made up for the lost years with much affection and attention. During the preparations for the trial, Rebecca discovered more details about Gerald's criminal activities. He had a well-structured scheme where he identified rural families in difficulty, offered seemingly advantageous financial solutions, and then used legal loopholes to take possession of the properties. Attorney Robert managed to locate Daniel Patrick, the former owner of the cooperative, who was living under a false identity in Tucson. When arrested, he decided to cooperate with the authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence, revealing all the details of the scheme and confirming that Gerald was the mastermind behind everything. Gerald would offer the loans and I would provide the false documentation at the cooperative. He had contacts at the notary's office who facilitated the irregular registrations. "We've harmed more than 20 families in the last 6 years," confessed Daniel Patrick in his testimony. These revelations strengthened Rebecca's case even further. A tie. Robert also managed to have several other victims included in the lawsuit, turning it into a collective action against the entire criminal scheme. The day of the trial arrived with great anticipation. The Bakersfield courthouse was packed with the affected families, neighbors, journalists, and onlookers. Rebecca was nervous, but confident in the evidence they had gathered. Gerald Thompson arrived accompanied by 3 expensive lawyers, showing he wouldn't give up easily. He denied all accusations and claimed the families had signed the contracts knowingly, and that the default was their responsibility. "Your Honor, my client is a respected businessman in the region who merely offered credit opportunities to families in need. If they were unable to honor their commitments, that does not constitute a crime," argued her lead attorney. Robert Anderson methodically presented all the evidence: the forged signatures, the testimony of Daniel Patrick, the recordings made by Rebecca's father, the threats recorded by Rebecca herself, and the testimonies of the other affected families. The most emotional moment was when Rebecca gave her testimony. She recounted her entire journey, from being thrown out of her home by her husband, through the shock of finding her parents' property in ruins, to the discovery of the evidence that revealed the whole truth. "Your Honor, my family didn't just lose a property. We lost our dignity, our hope, our family unity. My parents had to flee like criminals when they were actually victims. I almost lost my children because I had nowhere to live. This man destroyed several families and must answer for his crimes," she said, her voice breaking. The judge, Judge William Harris, appeared impressed by the quantity and quality of the evidence presented. After hearing all the testimonies and analyzing the documents, he announced he would deliver his sentence in 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks were the longest of Rebecca's life. Her entire family and the other victims anxiously awaited the result that could change their lives forever. Finally, the day of the sentencing arrived. The courthouse was packed once again. Judge William Harris entered the room, and everyone fell into absolute silence. After thoroughly analyzing all the evidence presented, this court has concluded that there was a clear commission of property crime through document forgery and misappropriation. The loan contracts signed by the families are all null and void, as they were based on false information and forged signatures, the judge began. Rebecca tightly held her mother's hand, scarcely able to believe what she was hearing. "Therefore, I order the annulment of all property transfers carried out through this criminal scheme. The wronged families will have their properties returned without any cost. Furthermore, I sentence the defendant, Gerald Thompson, to pay compensation for moral damages in the amount of $50,000 to each affected family." The courtroom erupted in applause. Rebecca cried with emotion in her parents' arms. Nathan and Emma, who were in the front row, ran to hug their mother, not fully understanding what was happening, but sensing it was something very good. Attorney Robert Anderson was euphoric. It was the biggest victory of his career and an important precedent for other similar cases in the region. Mr. George Johnson and the other affected families cried with joy at finally seeing justice served. Gerald Thompson was arrested at the end of the hearing. His empire, built on the suffering of hard-working families, had crumbled. Daniel Patrick was also convicted, but had his sentence reduced due to his cooperation with the authorities. With the legal victory secured, Rebecca now faced important decisions about her future. The property was legally back in the family's hands, the fake debts were annulled, and she would still receive $50,000 in compensation. But what to do with all of this? During the months of struggle, she had transformed. She was no longer the insecure young woman who had been thrown out of her home by her husband. She had become a determined woman who had faced difficult situations and proven herself capable of fighting for her rights. Her ex-husband, having learned through acquaintances about the legal victory and the compensation, attempted a reconciliation. He showed up at the rural property on a Sunday afternoon trying to talk. "Rebecca, I know I made mistakes in the past. I was going through a tough time at work, under a lot of pressure. Now that your life has stabilized, we could try to start over," he said, clearly interested in her new financial situation. "Marcus, you threw me out on the street with 2 small children. You didn't show an ounce of love or consideration for your own family. Now that things have improved for me, you want to come back? It doesn't work that way. But the children need their father. I can help with their education, give them a better life. My children are doing just fine without you. They've discovered their grandparents' love. They have a peaceful life in the countryside and no longer have to live in an environment of tension and arguments." Marcus insisted several times, even threatening to go to court to get shared custody of the children. But Attorney Robert Anderson advised him that, given the history of domestic violence and abandonment, it would be very difficult to get any rights over the girls. With that issue resolved, Rebecca focused on plans for her family's future. The rural property had great potential, but needed investments to become productive again. With the compensation and some money her parents had saved during the years of exile, she had the resources to begin. Mr. George Johnson, who had also recovered his property and received compensation, suggested that the families who benefited from the court decision should unite to create collective projects. "Rebecca, alone we are small rural producers with limited resources, but together we can do something bigger. How about we create a real, honest cooperative to strengthen our region?" he proposed during a meeting at the Mitchell property. The idea excited Rebecca. During the months of struggle, she had discovered leadership and organizational skills she didn't know she possessed. Coordinating the union of the wronged families, organizing evidence for the lawsuit and mobilizing the local community had been experiences that showed her potential. "Mr. George, I think it's an excellent idea. We can create something that not only benefits us, but serves as an example for other rural families in the region." They organized several meetings to discuss the project. Besides the families who were victims of Gerald's scheme, other small producers in the region were interested in participating. The proposal was to create an agricultural cooperative that would offer everything from technical assistance to support in marketing products. Rebecca was chosen as the project coordinator. Her story of struggle and triumph had earned everyone's respect. Attorney Robert offered to help with all the legal aspects of creating the cooperative without charging fees. With the compensation funds, Rebecca invested in recovering the family property. She completely renovated the house, created proper facilities for raising animals, and prepared the land for new crops. Nathan and Emma now had a real home, with space to play and grow up in contact with nature. Her parents, despite their advanced age, were happy to contribute with decades of experience working the land. Grandpa Harold taught traditional cultivation techniques, while Grandma Dorothy tended an organic garden that soon became famous in the region. The cooperative began to take shape 6 months after the court decision. 15 families joined the initial project, contributing their properties, knowledge, and resources. Rebecca discovered she was a natural administrator, organizing spreadsheets, coordinating meetings, and negotiating partnerships with companies in the region. One of the cooperative's first successes was a contract to supply organic products to supermarkets in Bakersfield and the surrounding area. The quality of the products and the story of triumph behind the project touched the local business owners, who offered favorable terms. Rebecca, I never imagined the day would come when our region would be known for the quality of its products, instead of being remembered for Gerald's schemes, commented Mr. George, proud of the results achieved. The transformation in Rebecca's life was complete. From a desperate young mother with nowhere to go, she had become a respected community leader, a successful rural entrepreneur, and, most importantly, a woman who had discovered her own strength. Nathan and Emma were growing up happily in the countryside. The girl excelled in school and dreamed of studying veterinary medicine to help the cooperative's animals. The boy, now 3 years old, talked non-stop about tractors and crops, showing an early interest in agriculture. 2 years after the court decision, the cooperative already had 30 member families and had become a benchmark for sustainable rural development in the region. Rebecca was invited to give lectures in other cities about community organization and rural entrepreneurship. During one of these trips, she met Michelle Williams, a lawyer specializing in rural rights who was researching cases similar to hers. Michelle was impressed with the story and suggested that Rebecca write a book about her experience. Rebecca, your story could inspire thousands of women going through difficult situations, showing that it's possible to start over, fight for justice, and build a better life is a very powerful example, said Michelle during a conversation at the cooperative's office. The book idea excited Rebecca, but she knew she would need help writing it. Michelle offered to collaborate, organizing the information and assisting with the writing. Together they spent months recording every detail of the journey from that terrible day when Rebecca was thrown out of her home. The book was published 2 years later under the title From Ruins to Rebuilding, a story of struggle and triumph in the countryside. The work had a major national impact, and Rebecca began receiving invitations to participate in television programs and events about women's entrepreneurship. But success didn't change her essence. She continued living on the rural property, managing the cooperative, and raising her children with the simple values she had learned from her parents. The house in ruins that once symbolized the end of everything had been transformed into the cooperative's community center, where meetings, courses, and events were held. One of the cooperative's most important initiatives was creating a microcredit program for rural women. Using part of the revenue generated from sales, they offered small, interest-free loans to women who wanted to start their own businesses. It was the way Rebecca found to multiply the opportunities she herself had won. The microcredit program benefited over 100 women in the first 2 years. They created bakeries, pastry shops, sewing workshops, small animal farms, and various other ventures. The region began to be known not only for its agricultural products, but also for the vitality of the small businesses run by women. Rebecca never married again, but not for lack of opportunity. Several men in the region showed interest, including Atty Robert Anderson, who confessed he had fallen in love with her during the legal proceedings. She would kindly thank them, but explain that she was living a moment of personal and professional fulfillment that she didn't want to share with a romantic relationship. Sir Robert, you are a wonderful man and will be an excellent husband for some woman, but I've discovered a form of happiness that doesn't depend on anyone but myself and my family. I hope you understand, she said affectionately but firmly. Nathan and Emma, now 6 and 10 years old respectively, were confident and happy children. They had a present and loving mother, caring grandparents, and lived in a community that welcomed and protected them. They never asked about their father again, for they had found in the extended family of the cooperative all the references they needed. The Mitchell property became a model of sustainable agriculture in the region. Rebecca implemented modern irrigation techniques, crop rotation, and organic composting. Productivity increased significantly, and the products received organic certification that allowed for better prices in the market. One Sunday morning, 5 years after that dramatic day when she arrived at the ruins of her parents' house, Rebecca woke up early as always. She prepared breakfast for the whole family and went out for her morning walk around the property. She observed the lush crops, listened to the song of the birds that had returned with the environmental recovery of the area, and breathe the clean air that only the countryside can offer. "Mom, are you happy?" asked Emma, who had joined the morning walk. "Very happy, my daughter. Happier than I ever imagined I could be." "Because of the cooperative?" "Because of everything. Because of you, your grandparents, our home, our work, the people we help. Because I discovered that I am much stronger than I thought." Emma smiled and held her mother's hand. They walked together to the old house in ruins, now transformed into the cooperative's community center. There, where Rebecca had once cried in despair, now functioned a library, meeting rooms, and a small museum that told the history of the region and of the cooperative itself. "Mom, do you think I'll ever be as brave as you?" "My daughter, you are already brave, and I hope you never have to go through what I went through to discover that." That afternoon, Rebecca received an unexpected call. It was from a television producer from California who wanted to make a documentary about her story and the impact of the cooperative in the region. Another opportunity to show that it is possible to start over and build something better than what was lost. She agreed to participate in the documentary, but with one condition: that part of the revenue be allocated to expanding the microcredit program to other regions of the state. Her personal story only made sense if it could inspire and help other women discover their own strength. The documentary aired on a Friday night on national television. The Mitchell family gathered in the living room of the renovated house to watch. Nathan and Emma were impressed to see their mother on television, emotionally recounting all the difficult moments they had gone through together. "Mommy, you're famous!" exclaimed 6-year-old Nathan when he saw the footage of the cooperative. "No, my son. I am just a mother who learned to fight for her family and discovered she could help other people too." The documentary had a great impact. Rebecca received hundreds of messages from women from all over the United States, telling similar stories and asking for advice. She responded to each one personally, offering words of encouragement and practical guidance on how to seek legal help and organize communally. 6 months later, Rebecca was invited to participate in a national congress on rural development in Washington, D.C. It was the first time she had left the state of California since she had returned to her parents' property. The trip was a remarkable experience, as she learned about projects similar to hers in other regions of the country. At the Congress, she presented a panel on women's cooperativism and social transformation. Her presentation was the most applauded of the event. There, she realized that her story had transcended regional boundaries and become a national symbol of overcoming adversity and rural entrepreneurship. Back in Bakersfield, Rebecca found an even more prosperous community. The cooperative had ended the year with the best results since its creation. The community center was running at full steam, offering vocational courses, adult literacy classes, and cultural activities for the entire region. Her parents, now over 70, remained active and proud of the daughter they had raised. Grandpa Harold used to tell the neighbors that Rebecca had inherited his stubbornness and her mother's determination, a combination that made her invincible. "Sweetheart, when you arrived here that day, broken and without hope, I never imagined you'd become the woman you are today," said Grandma Dorothy one evening when they were all gathered on the house's porch. "Mom, I didn't become this woman. I always was her, I just didn't know it. Sometimes we need to lose everything to discover what we're truly capable of achieving." In the spring of 2019, 7 years after her arrival at the ruins of the family property, Rebecca decided to expand the cooperative's projects even further. With her own resources and partnerships with universities, she created a sustainable agriculture research center that attracted students and researchers from across the country. The research center developed new organic farming techniques suited to the region's climate and soil. These innovations were shared freely with all interested rural producers, multiplying the positive impact far beyond the cooperative itself. Emma, now 14, was already showing interest in following in her mother's footsteps. She attended cooperative meetings, helped organize events, and dreamed of studying rural administration to improve the family projects. Nathan, 10 years old, preferred the technical side of farming and spent hours with his grandfather learning about soils, seeds, and irrigation. One autumn afternoon, while reviewing the cooperative's expansion plans for the following year, Rebecca received a special letter. It was from a young mother from Virginia who had read her book and felt inspired to legally fight for a property she had lost under similar circumstances. Dear Rebecca, I want to thank you for sharing your story with us. Thanks to your example, I found the courage to seek out a lawyer and discovered I too was a victim of a fraudulent scheme. I'm fighting in court, and I know I will succeed. Your story taught me that we should never give up on our rights. Warmly, Ashley Bennett. It was yet another confirmation that her journey had a greater purpose. Rebecca decided to create a website where other women could share their stories of struggle and triumph. The project grew quickly, forming a national network of mutual support among rural women. The site, Women of the Countryside, Stories of Courage, became an important platform for exchanging experiences, offering basic legal guidance, and organizing support campaigns for cases similar to Rebecca's. Volunteer lawyers from across the country offered their services through the platform. In 2020, the pandemic brought new challenges, but also opportunities. The cooperative adapted quickly, creating an online sales and delivery system that connected rural producers directly with urban consumers. Rebecca coordinated all the logistics, demonstrating once again her leadership ability in difficult times. During the social isolation period, she took the opportunity to write her second book, this time focused on practical techniques for community organization and sustainable rural development. The work would be a manual for other communities interested in replicating the cooperative's model. The second book, Building Bridges, Rural Community Development Manual, was launched in 2021 and became required reading in various rural administration and social development courses across the country. Universities began regularly inviting Rebecca for lectures and seminars. But as gratifying as the external recognitions were, what made Rebecca most proud was the development of her own community. The region where discouragement and a sense of abandonment once prevailed had transformed into a hub of rural innovation and prosperity. The children in the area now had a full-time school, a community health center, a library, and various extracurricular activity options. Young people no longer needed to migrate to big cities in search of opportunities. They existed right there, created by the community itself. During one of the researchers' visits to the Cooperative Study Center, Rebecca met Dr. Patricia Reynolds, a Mexican sociologist studying similar projects in North America. Patricia was impressed with the results achieved in such a short time. Rebecca, what you've built here is a model that should be replicated across the continent. The social transformation I observe in this community is extraordinary, commented Patricia during an interview for her research. Dr. Patricia, the secret isn't any magic formula. It's simply believing that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they unite for a common purpose. This conversation inspired Rebecca to think globally. She began establishing contacts with similar projects in other countries, creating an international network of rural cooperatives led by women. The project was called Seeds of Hope and quickly gained participation from communities in Canada, Vermont, Oregon, and Texas. The international project brought cultural and technical exchanges that further enriched the experience of the U.S. cooperative. Young people from the region began having opportunities to study sustainable agriculture in other countries, while the community received international visitors interested in learning their techniques. In 2023, 10 years after her arrival at the ruins of the family property, Rebecca was nominated to receive the Rural Achievement Medal, the nation's highest honor for those contributing to agricultural development. The ceremony would be in Washington, D.C., with the president in attendance. The entire family traveled to the Capitol for the ceremony. Nathan and Emma, now 12 and 16 respectively, were proud to see their mother recognized nationally for her work. Her parents, despite their advanced age, didn't miss the chance to witness this historic moment. During her speech at the ceremony, Rebecca moved everyone by dedicating the medal not only to her family, but to all rural women who fight daily for better living conditions. This medal isn't mine. It belongs to every woman who had the courage to start over when everything seemed lost. It belongs to every mother who protected her children, even in the most adverse conditions. It belongs to everyone who believes we can build a fairer country, starting from our own communities, she said, visibly emotional. Rebecca's speech was widely covered in the press and on social media. Thousands of people shared her words, creating a spontaneous movement valuing rural work and female entrepreneurship. Back in Bakersfield, Rebecca found a surprise prepared by the community. They had organized a party in the town's central square to celebrate the medal. Hundreds of people attended, including many of the families who had benefited from the cooperative's projects over the years. "Rebecca, you transformed our region. Where there was once only hopelessness, there is now pride in living here," said the town mayor during the tribute. But for Rebecca, the most moving moment was when the municipal school children presented a play telling her story. Watching those children reenact her journey of struggle and triumph was the confirmation that her story had become part of that community's memory and inspiration. That night at home, Rebecca sat on the porch where she often reflected on the course of her life. She watched the full moon illuminate the prosperous property her family had rebuilt. The quiet of the countryside was broken only by the natural sounds of the night and the distant voices of Nathan and Emma talking in their rooms. She thought of the desperate young woman who had arrived there 10 years earlier, carrying 2 small children and no hope. That woman could never have imagined she would become a national leader, that her children would grow up safe and happy, that her parents could live their final years with dignity and pride. "Thank you," she whispered into the night, directing her gratitude to all the forces that had conspired to help her find strength when she needed it most. The next day, Rebecca woke as usual at 5 in the morning. She prepared the family's coffee, checked on the animals, and went for her morning walk around the property. It was another ordinary day in a life that had become extraordinary, not through grand achievements, but through the ability to transform difficulties into opportunities for growth. During her walk, she passed the spot where the ruined house that had welcomed her on that first day back had stood. Now the community center that served the entire region operated there. Children played on the playground, built with funds from the cooperative. Young people attended a computer skills class. Women shared experiences in a mutual support group. It was living proof that no matter how great the ruins we encounter in our lives, what matters is our ability to build something better upon the rubble of what we lost. Rebecca had transformed the place that symbolized her greatest despair into the center of her greatest joy. At 42, she knew she still had many projects ahead. Emma already talked about studying law to help other families like theirs. Nathan showed a talent for agricultural engineering and dreamed of developing machines to make the work of small farmers easier. Her parents, despite their age, remained active and full of plans. The cooperative grew every year, including more families and expanding its services. The research center developed innovations that benefited producers across the country. The microcredit program had helped more than 500 women. The international Seeds of Hope network connected cooperatives in 12 countries. But above all, Rebecca had built for herself and her family a life based on genuine happiness, purposeful work, and the certainty that each day was an opportunity to make a difference in other people's lives. One summer morning, exactly 12 years after the day she was thrown out of her home by her ex-husband, Rebecca received a letter that made her smile. It was from Marcus, her ex-husband, who now lived in California and had faced various financial and personal difficulties over the years. In the letter, he apologized for what he had done and expressed admiration for what she had built. He asked for nothing in return, only wanted her to know that he recognized he had been a fool to let go of a woman like her. He ended by saying he was proud that his daughters had such an extraordinary mother. Rebecca read the letter once and put it away in a drawer. She felt no anger or resentment toward the man who had once caused her so much pain. That person belonged to a chapter of her life that was definitively closed. She had discovered that true happiness came not from anyone else, but from the ability to build a life with purpose and meaning. End of the story. Now tell us, what did you think of Rebecca's journey? Do you believe she made the right decisions throughout the story? Leave a comment telling us which part moved you the most, and if you know anyone who has gone through a similar situation. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one.